This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of
enough. You can get the TrueFire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get TrueFire All Access for.
I remember a time not too long ago where basically someone had asked me if I'd be interested in a trade with a PRS DGT. So this is actually the guitar that is strongest in my mind when I think of, like, actually I bought the wrong guitar essentially. But I drove like an hour and a half, 2 hours to this guy's place, and he was interested in trading it for a Fender Custom Shop Strat, and that Strat was actually a really nice Strat. He did, and I was like, I'd definitely be up for trading this. He played the DGT a little bit, and he kind of decided, like, there and then, it's like, I've wasted your time. You've driven all this way, and he was really apologetic. And at the time, I was kind of like, well, yeah, this has been a waste of time. And it was kind of annoying, obviously. But now I think about it, actually, I kind of respect the guy for that, because it was kind of like, well, yeah, he knew right away, you know, and despite how awkward it might have been at the time, you know, it meant that he didn't have this feeling, which I think quite a lot of us, I'm assuming, are kind of familiar with, where you've bought the wrong guitar and you've ended up with this thing, and it might be a cheaper guitar, it might be a more expensive guitar. For me, the time when I feel it most is when it's an expensive guitar, and then you kind of think, right, well, now I've got to sell it or whatever. So in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about how you can sort of know what those feelings are, and maybe, you know, make a decision in the moment that doesn't lead to you losing a load of money, potentially. So I guess point one really is that a guitar shop, or, you know, in an interaction where you're just playing the guitar in front of someone who is hoping that you're going to buy it, is not really the most reasonable way to actually make a decision about guitar. So some of the things that I like to do when I've actually got the chance to evaluate a guitar, I'll sit and I'll play it through my own rig. That is really, really important, because, you know, guitar shops are oftentimes not going to have the sorts of things that you're used to using. You know, so I can remember trying guitars and it'd be like through a Mesa Boogie Mark V through a Recto cabinet, and it's kind of like, well, this is not really that similar to the kind of setup I would use. And that kind of thing could be really tricky. So that could also go both ways. So I think you could end up trying a guitar and thinking, actually, this doesn't suit me. So that is kind of a two-edged thing where it's like, well, you might have missed out on sort of a guitar that would really have worked for you very well just because you didn't actually get it into an environment where you're comfortable playing. But equally, I think here we're kind of more talking about when it turns out that you've actually bought this thing that when you get it home is a little bit like, I don't want to play that. Another thing I like to do is just put it on a set of scales, because I think it can be kind of hard to judge how heavy or not a guitar feels, you know, based on the grip of the neck. Now, this is not necessarily a deal breaker altogether. One of my preferences is that I don't want to end up with a guitar that I kind of feel is super heavy, or even on the heavier side. I kind of like to go further towards it being a lighter guitar. So in my head, there are some weights around like a Strat or a Telly. So like a Telly, like around £7 ideally. For a Strat, ideally around £7.5. If it gets up towards £8, it's not necessarily a deal breaker if there were other things that I loved about it. But I can tell from my own collection that, you know, there is some desire for me that it is not a super heavy guitar, particularly if I'm going to be gigging the thing. So, you know, like my K-Line Les Paul KL59, that's under £8. The K-Line Blue Strat is £7, 7 ounces. The Nacho is under £7. You know, I have a preference for these guitars that go a little bit lighter. But you can't really just weigh a guitar in a shop. What I really like about some places like Project Music and Peach Guitars, I think Andertons do it now with some of their more expensive stuff, is that they do get in there and weigh the guitars. And I think that's a really good practice, because it just helps, do you know what I mean? Where it's like, I know that I'm not going to end up buying a Telecaster and it turns up and weighs £10 or whatever like that. So I've got a friend, Randy, who has gone through this. He's been looking to buy like a guitar that he really wants to bond with, and he's actually gone through a few. And so I asked him, like, how did you know you had bought the wrong guitar these last few times? So he says the first one wouldn't stay in tune. Its neck wasn't my favourite. The second guitar, so the first one was an EVH. The second one was a PRS S2. A pattern thin neck was too wide. Then he bought a third guitar. Had either a bad bridge pickup or just tonally wasn't wired as it should have been, and he didn't get on with it. Then now he's got a PRS Custom 24 semi-hollow. I think that's an SE, right? And that one is a keeper, but I think he's still somewhat honeymoony in that kind of period as well. But he says, I hate buying guitars online, it's a crapshoot. So that is kind of the nice thing. I think he might have bought through Sweetwater, where you've got like a period of time to kind of evaluate it. And equally in the UK, like if you buy from a retailer, we have like 14 days where you can make your decision, and it might cost you £10 or £15, but it's nowhere near as much as the hit you would take from buying a new guitar and then selling it used most of the time, right? Where you're going to lose a good chunk of the money. So the things that I've been checking for: weight, looks are really important. Now I know we kind of have that in mind, that it's a little bit silly. But equally, if you know yourself that if it doesn't have the right headstock, you're never going to look at it right, then, for instance, something like this K-Line is not going to be the one that works for you, right? Because that is not the right headstock unless you want a K-Line headstock. So be aware of your prejudices in that regard as well. So if you're looking for a Gibson Les Paul and not just a Gibson Les Paul shaped object, then don't be, I guess, kind of distracted by this. You know, there's like great alternatives like Maybach or Eastman. But if you know that you're looking for specifically a Gibson, then I think you can be fairly confident that that gas won't go away unless it has Gibson on the headstock. I don't know if any of you guys have managed to get past that or not, but that's just one of those things that I think it's tempting, but sometimes like brands and aesthetics and those kind of things are really important. Equally, so I think you know you've got the wrong guitar if it kind of just sits in a cupboard and doesn't get played. But also for me, one of the feelings that I get is that I've got this kind of guilt because it's like a lot of money tied up in an instrument. So like that PRS DGT that I bought off of Dave from up the road, who also let me borrow a PRS Silver Sky at the same time. Now, he was selling the Silver Sky too, but I think he wanted too much for me at the time for that. And I think I would have been actually much happier with the Silver Sky than I was with the DGT. I ended up not using the DGT, specifically the same thing that the guy said to me that was going to trade it with me, was that if I'm going to gig this thing, I'm just not sure that I'm ever going to get comfortable with the kind of setup of the volume and all of that stuff. Equally, there was something about the way that specific PRS looked where it was like, it looked very flashy, but when I played the guitar, I didn't really feel much of anything towards it. And then I kind of compared it to a Gibson Les Paul that I had at the time, and it was like, well, actually, I way prefer this Gibson to play. And so it just sat in that cupboard for, you know, like about a year, didn't get played. Well, not just that cupboard, it sat in that cupboard. I lived in a house as well before where it didn't get played either. And it was just kind of a bit of a burden. Luckily, I bought used, and this is, I guess, one of the things, like buying used is one of those ways that really makes a lot of sense, because it's like, if you sell that thing on again, provided you got it for a reasonable price, you probably won't make much of a loss at all. And I kind of like buying used for that reason. The other thing for me is that don't be afraid of a used guitar in general. There must be something wrong with that for someone to just sell it. But equally, I think we all have our own things that we're looking for a guitar. Like, for instance, you might not care if a Strat weighs close to 8 pounds. You might be looking for a skinnier neck. Luckily, there's loads of guitars being made all the time, and they're all a little bit different. So the things about this guitar that I really like and make it easily the guitar that I would choose over any of the other K-Line Springfields that I've played, and not the same for other people. Like David Beebe and Tom Quayle have played a couple of mine. Charlie Allen played this one as well as the yellow one, and they've got their own preferences. Like David Beebe likes his green Springfield that I sold to him the best. I like this the best. I think Charlie preferred the yellow K-Line to this one. So it's maybe the wrong guitar for you, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong guitar overall. And that's kind of the thing to remember when you're buying from a used person, is that their preferences are different to you. So that's, for me, how I know when I've got the wrong guitar. It might feel uncomfortable to play. There'll be something maybe psychological, something conscious, maybe unconscious, that when you pick it up, or maybe you just don't pick it up. And in that case, I feel like hopefully you can find that within the honeymoon period as well. Like if it's a really short honeymoon, then you'll know. Equally, if it's causing you pain and stuff, then you might have the wrong guitar. If you want to play through that pain, maybe you have a more complex problem that you need to work through. So for me, I'm still not totally convinced that my hand loves this V-neck. So that is, in some regards, unfortunately, the wrong guitar for me. But I'm still so in love with it that there's no way that this guitar is going anywhere. So yeah, I think you'll know as well from maybe hearing your own playing through it, or other people might hear it with you. Like I've had some people say that they really like the way this sounds. Equally, I've had probably people say the opposite. But I think you should be gravitating towards that guitar a bit, right? And if you're not, then there might be a reason why, and maybe it is that it's just not right for you. And it's okay, I think, to then ditch a guitar that doesn't speak to you. That's my opinion on it, but I thought it was kind of an interesting little thing, just because I'm sure a bunch of you guys are buying and selling guitars all the time as well. So if you've got kind of go-to tips and things that you do and check, let folks know in the comments. I think another thing to consider is if there's just one or two things that are not quite right, then you could consider that. But I think there's another side of things where if you're trying to think of loads and loads and loads of things at one time to fix about a guitar, then maybe it's not the right choice. Unless you're really into the modding idea, which I think is totally valid too. And that could be seen as an ideal, right? I'm going to mix and match parts. Like I need to find the right neck, I need to find the right pickups. That's a totally valid way to end up with a guitar that is exactly to your specs as well. But maybe buying off the shelf with it in mind that you're going to change this, 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 and this might not always be a route to ending up with a guitar that you really like. If you didn't like it at the first point, you may not end up liking it either. I would say that one way to get the best out of every single guitar is to have, like, either you can do like a bit of tech work on it yourself, or you've got a tech that can get that extra 20% out of the guitar, because that is really the important part, right? These are mostly coming out of CNC machines. It is down to who gets their hand on the guitar and the amount of time that goes into it that makes a really great guitar, I think, beyond specs.